Ever since he was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Spider-Man has been on the forefront of the comic book industry. Stan Lee had a stroke of genius when he came up with this creative power set, and Steve Ditko's costume remains one of the most iconic looks in any visual medium. There's a reason why the only significant change to his costume that actually stuck around is when they removed his web armpit things. Spider-Man has a mass appeal no other superhero has. Sure, Batman and Iron Man and a whole host of heroes have no powers, but they have other abilities like superhuman intellect that makes them just as outlandish as Superman or the Flash. Spider-Man has powers, but Peter Parker is a loser. A good Spider-Man story has life taking a dump on Peter Parker in spite of his powers, and a great Spider-Man story has life taking a dump on Spider-Man because of his powers. Peter Parker is completely mentally incapable of not doing the right thing. His love life be damned, his job be damned, his school be damned, his rent be damned, his happiness be damned. This moral fortitude, juxtaposed with how much he suffers and triumphs, has made him the everyman's hero, and it has led to success no other Marvel character has had. Between 2002 and now, there has been no less than 6 Spider-Man films in theaters and 2 crossovers in the MCU, with 2 more films, a spin-off, and another Avengers film on the way. And I'm going to briefly talk about all of the ones that have come out so far.
Who am I? You sure you want to know? If somebody told you I was just your average, ordinary guy, not a care in the world, somebody lied.
The first 3 were written and directed by Sam Raimi, who made a name for himself doing indie horror films like Evil Dead. And when he got the job of bringing Spider-Man to life, he started at the beginning, not just with Spider-Man's origin, but with the origin of Spider-Man, Stan Lee's original vision for the character and the life that Steve Ditko's art breathed into him. Raimi didn't make an all-encompassing thesis on the character like Richard Donner's Superman before him or the MCU's Captain America after him. He didn't do a modern monochromatic take like Bryan Singer's X-Men, and he didn't adapt a particular story. Instead, he adapted the original feel of the 60s comics. Because of that, there's a timeless quality about these first 3 films. They're corny as all hell, but warm and endearing and melodramatic and everything that Spider-Man was and is. They got the character so right the first time that every other adaptation is going to be forever stuck in Sam Raimi's shadow. Tobey Maguire is a perfect Peter Parker. He's an awkward, nerdy loser who tries to project confidence in the Spider-Man persona, but always comes off as the strangely endearing dork. In other words, he's perfect. But if we're talking perfect, I have to mention our Lord and Savior J.K. freaking Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. The rest of the cast does fairly well. Willem Dafoe is a lot of fun as Norman Osborn. Rosemary Harris comes right off the original panels as Aunt May. James Franco is decent as Harry Osborn, and I even like Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane. She's certainly the weak link in the worst part of the 3rd film, but she's perfectly serviceable here. The problem with Spider-Man villains is that they were all made to be one note. An original concept, a challenging opponent, and gets beaten and only comes back for the occasional revenge plot or team-up. This problem does not affect the Sam Raimi trilogy because of how each film feels like a standalone ordeal. But I do have issues with the Green Goblin's suit. Actually, that's my biggest problem with this first film. Sam Raimi didn't really grow with the bigger budget. He still directed the film like it was an indie film. Because of that, a lot of the CGI looks bad, even for 2002, and a lot of the fight scenes look more like Power Rangers than a Spider-Man comic. And I know Sam Raimi was experimenting with the facial prosthetic for Green Goblin, but I wish he would have actually succeeded. This costume is one of the weakest aspects of the entire trilogy. Even so, this original movie gets so much right. It was far ahead of its time. Outside of its sequels, it wouldn't be until Iron Man came out 6 years later that someone would do this well with a superhero adaptation. Spider-Man gets an 8 out of 10.
I believe there's a hero in all of us. Even though sometimes we have to give up the thing we want the most.
I want a life of my own. I'm Spider-Man. No more. Let's see who's behind the mask.
Spider-Man 2 kicked everything up a notch. Spider-Man 2 is the best standalone Spider-Man film by a long shot. Everything that was great about the last film is back, and several things are better. Harry Osborn is giving a compelling arc, Mary Jane is at her most likable here, and Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus wrote the freaking book on how to do sympathetic villains. Likeable enough to be charming, compelling enough to be believable, tragic enough to where we can see where he's coming from, and crazy enough to where we don't actually root for him. Honestly, it wouldn't be until Thanos and Infinity War that anyone ever recreated this perfect balance, and even then, until we get the Mad Titan's backstory, he'll only be a discount Doc Ock. And Doc Ock's interplay with Spider-Man is a textbook example of how to make a hero-villain dynamic. There's a whole host of nitpicks that hold this film back from perfection. Mary Jane is at her most likable, but that's still not saying much. And a lot of its big plot points feel really contrived, and not even a good contrived. Even so, Spider-Man 2 gets a 9 out of 10.
I'm gonna ask MJ to marry me.
A man has to put his wife before himself. Can you do that, Peter?
Yeah, I think I can.
Revenge is like a poison. It can take us over. And before you know it, can turn you into something ugly.
The suit. Where'd this come from? The power. Feels good.
Spider-Man 3 is not, I repeat, is not a bad movie. It's just a downgrade in most respects. It's compromised. Sam Raimi wanted to stick to the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko run for inspiration and have Sandman as the villain. Sony wanted to use Venom because he was a popular character. Sam Raimi doesn't like Venom, and for good reason. He has a convoluted origin and not much going on in the personality department. But Sony signs the check, so Raimi had to smash the two compromised ideas into one film. But that's not the only problem. Thomas Hayden Church does a good job as Sandman. His transformation sequence is among the best scenes in the trilogy, but he's just a hollow attempt at recreating Doc Ock, and his role retcons some things with Spider-Man's origin that really did not need to happen at all. Harry Osborn's plot gets sidetracked as well. He comes in looking like a sky-surfing ninja, gets bonked on the head, loses his memories, gets them back, and then scares MJ into leaving Peter, and that's the dumbest thing in this movie. Mary Jane knows Peter is Spider-Man at this point. Why didn't she just tell him Harry got his memories back and needs to get his ass kicked again? And then there's Topher Grace's Venom, who feels really tacked on despite the symbiote being a pretty consistent force in this movie. I do think he's fun for what little screen time he gets, and when I think of a dark parallel to Tobey Maguire, well, Topher Grace actually seems like good casting on that front. But I know what you all want me to talk about. The dancing. It's cringy. It's awkward. It's silly. It's perfect. This is exactly what Peter Parker would think a cool and confident person would do. He's being manipulated by the symbiote. You are not supposed to like it. There's some great action, the CGI looks great, and there are some moments of actual genius on display. So I give Spider-Man 3 a 6 out of 10. Well, after that it would be a while before Spider-Man showed up on the big screen again, getting his MCU debut in... Hold on. I gotta do this. Hello.
Hey, Media, I heard you were talking about the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah?
Well, I just wanted to make sure you didn't forget to talk about the Mark Webb movies.
Can I just act like they don't exist?
They do exist, and are a big reason why the newer movies are the way they are. You have to talk about them.
Fine. Let's do this.
This life is not an easy one. I've made enemies.
Peter, secrets have a cost.
I gotta stop him.
You really are.
The Amazing Spider-Man is anything but amazing. Sony wanted Sam Raimi to direct a fourth movie because, despite popular belief, Spider-Man 3 actually did well enough. But Sam Raimi pulled out of the project and took the entire cast with him. And with Marvel buying up the rights to all their heroes, Sony had to reboot or risk losing their biggest franchise. Enter Mark Webb, someone who had made a name for himself with indie rom-coms who totally didn't get this job because his last name is Webb. The Amazing Spider-Man movies are creatively bankrupt. When they're not ripping things wholesale from Sam Raimi's trilogy, they're chasing the trend set by the MCU. Sam Raimi had a vision. He had a style that was all his own, and he brought the character to life. Mark Webb has none of that going for him. The best part of both these movies is the action. A lot of it is really good. The suit never looked better. The other good part of these films is the chemistry with the two leads. I don't like Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker. He's just too cool with his skateboard and his jacket and his Edward Cullen haircut. He also does stupid things that would definitely blow his secret identity, like throwing a football so hard it bends a goalpost. I'm not making that up. But Garfield does have great chemistry with Emma Stone, no one's favorite Zombieland star, who plays Gwen Stacy in these films. But I really don't like how easily they get together in these films. There's no challenge. And then you have the villain, the Lizard. The Lizard is a great first villain for Spider-Man. He's got a great look, his origin can really challenge Parker's beliefs, and because the Lizard itself is a big monster, it allows for a lot of character growth, but nope, they just made him the same exact character as Green Goblin from the first film. And instead of being a monster, he's a guy that just wants to use a skybeam to turn New York into lizard monsters. It is really that boring. He's basically the ultimate version of Green Goblin. They call this movie amazing, which has implications of the original comics, but everything about these films is the dated, edgy, early 2000s hipster version of the comics from the Ultimate Run. Amazing Spider-Man is a 5 out of 10. It's still enjoyable in some parts, it's just so wrong-headed and derivative of infinitely better movies.
Every day, I wake up knowing that the more people I try to save, the more enemies I will make.
Secrets have a cost. The truth does too.
Amazing Spider-Man 2 is an absolute train wreck. It makes all the same problems as Amazing Spider-Man, compounds them with all the problems with Spider-Man 3. Amazing Spider-Man 2 looks really cool. The costumes are great. The CGI is outstanding, but there's no worthwhile substance. Paul Giamatti plays the Rhino, but he's hardly in it. He just has a pair of bookend fights that were setting up for a Sinister Six film. Jamie Foxx's Electro is really, really bad and awkward, and I get that's what they were going for, but instead of bringing Electro to life, they brought the ultimate version of Electro to life, and then gave him a discount version of the Riddler's motivation from Batman Forever. And then you have Dane DeHaan, who I really want to like, as Harry Osborn. And no joke, he is in this movie less than Topher Grace was in Spider-Man 3. They're practically the same movie, but they should know better. And that's not the end of my complaints. This film is an empty, vacuous, gutless experience, and people defend this crap because Peter Parker has web shooters in this movie and he didn't in the Sam Raimi films. Yeah, web shooters are nice, but they don't actually do anything with them. He never runs out at a critical moment or anything. It's just fan service, same as the teases for Sinister Six. And same with the death of Gwen Stacy. Marvel, Sony, killing off a beloved character is only ballsy when that character is not primarily known for dying. Acting like this was a risky move is like killing off Uncle Ben and acting like it was a risky move. And then you have all the Destiny crap. Making Spider-Man a chosen one destined to be Spider-Man forgets the entire point of Spider-Man. When I first saw this in the theaters, I was angry. I've never left a theater as angry as I did when I watched Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I was one of the poor saps that saw the Ruby Volume 5 premiere in theaters. I saw Batman v Superman, I saw Suicide Squad, I saw the Transformers movies, and did not leave the theater that angry. It's worse than Batman v Superman. It's worse than Suicide Squad. It's worse than any other superhero movie to come out this decade. It's a 3 out of 10. And the box office agrees because Amazing Spider-Man 2 flopped so hard Marvel was able to negotiate a contract to loan poor browbeaten Peter Parker and put him in the MCU.
On the roof!
Hey everyone.
He made his debut in Captain America Civil War, where actual teenager Tom Holland was cast in the role. He is perfect for the little bit he's in the crossover films. Tom Holland is great, especially in Infinity War, and especially in that scene, you know the one. Them having him be this small-time hero in the same world as Thor, Hulk, and Iron Man is a spin that the prior films just couldn't allow. But he doesn't get much screen time in Civil War or Infinity War, but he did get his own movie in between.
What's up, guys? Wait a minute. You guys aren't the real Avengers. I can tell Hulk gives it away. I'm feeling rough, I'm
feeling wrong. Listen, I know school sucks.
Peter, you still with us?
Yeah.
I know you want to save the world, but You're not ready yet.
Don't mess with me, because I will kill you and everybody you love.
Spider-Man Homecoming isn't a perfect film. It's not even a perfect Spider-Man film. A few things come a little too easy for him, and even though he's the quintessential New York superhero, he doesn't seem to spend a whole lot of time in New York. And with the presence of other heroes, particularly Iron Man, it makes Parker's decisions feel a little less important. Tom Holland is amazing in the film. The whole cast deserves a round of applause, but I really love this dynamic with Tony Stark. It fits so perfectly with Stark's character arc throughout these films. This whole bit is so perfect. I'm almost glad that Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a dumpster fire, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't have these scenes, and I can't imagine the MCU, especially Infinity War, without him. Especially in that scene, and again, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Michael Keaton as Vulture is the best part of this movie. He is shit your pants intense. I'd say he's almost on par with Dr. Octopus, but I think he leans too far into being sympathetic. I actually kind of root for him a little bit. Spider-Man Homecoming was great and entertaining, but a little disposable. Again, they got it so right the first time that even this just feels unnecessary. Spider-Man Homecoming gets an 8 out of 10. It's one of the stronger standalone films, and I am excited for Infinity War Part 2 and Spider-Man Far From Home. So that's all for the Spider-Man movies. I'm rolling my eyes pretty hard at Into the Spider-Verse, but Nicolas Cage's Spider-Man Noir is so bafflingly hilarious, it'll be worth seeing just for that. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on the Spider-Man franchise? Are you excited for the upcoming films? Should I do more videos like this? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Mediocrity4. Thanks for watching.